Was Jesus' soul already incarnated before God's human manifestation? Time after time I want to reveal my love for you by introducing you to knowledge which will make you very happy, because like a bright light it will unveil things to you which previously were obscured by darkness, and because your degree of awareness will be raised again, which also signifies a maturing of the soul. For love always will and has to be the foundation for the conveyance of my word. I could not address you if a certain degree of love were not present, and thus this love will let the light of realization shine ever more brightly within you. You are still occupied by questions which only I am able to answer, because only I know the regions you wish to understand better. All elevated, previously not fallen spirits also incarnate on earth in order to take the path through the abyss for the purpose of attaining the highest goal, the childship to God. And for this purpose, they have to live on earth in the flesh. They embody themselves as a human being and live their earthly life just as every once fallen original spirit. They, too, have to struggle and resist all temptations with which they are confronted by my adversary's side. Thus, they must have passed in truth through the abyss in order to then, when they are recalled, return as a child of God to me, their eternal Father. And beings of light have descended at all times in order to help people who, as once fallen beings, should achieve their return to me. The light beings' love is very strong and profound so that they are always helpful and only ever intend to return my lost children to me. And I do not stop them if they want to descend to earth in order to bring help, which is always needed. But the beings had always come from me, permeated by my light of love. They were living creations of utmost perfection who, with the same will as mine, work with me in the spiritual kingdom as well as on earth when they descend for the purpose of a mission. No being of light will ever exclude itself from a mission of bringing light to the earthly inhabitants. And thus, the soul, which as the human being Jesus accomplished the act of salvation on earth, was also such a spirit of light who had initially emerged from me as a light ray of love to which I gave independent life. This spirit had accepted a unique mission because he had realized from the start that the fallen beings needed him, because he realized from the start that the first human being would fail and that he, therefore, as the human being Jesus wanted to help humanity. He was indeed, from the start, also actively involved in the creation of the material world, for my will and strength flowed into all beings who had remained loyal to me and who therefore were active as independent beings in infinity. This soul, too, had descended to earth. This soul, too, had already previously served me as a spirit of light, and it established a connection between the people and God, that is, it came to people as a spirit of light and thus enabled me myself to audibly speak to people through this soul. Hence this spirit of light served me as a cover, nevertheless not physically, albeit certainly temporarily visible to people but not permanently, inasmuch as that he did not live on earth as a human being, but only worked amongst people apparently having the same physical substance, and yet he was and remained a spiritual being which disappeared again from sight of those whom it helped through instructions and discourses. Elevated beings of light indeed embodied themselves physically on earth too, and as representatives of myself always also proclaimed my will to people, for it was necessary to provide them with the information about why and for what purpose they lived on earth in spiritual hardship. Nevertheless, a distinction has to be made between the earthly life of a being of light as a human being and the appearance of a spirit of light through whom I communicated myself. In that case the spirit of light was not my visible external cover, as was the case with the human being Jesus, but he only served me to proclaim my word to people in a natural manner, for I could also have addressed people from above but then they would have lost their freedom of will. Thus, I always availed myself of an external form which could either be a physical or a spiritual human being. However, the former lived his life on earth as a human being, whereas the latter was only temporarily visible to people because they urgently required my word. Consequently, if it is said that Jesus' soul had repeatedly incarnated before my human manifestation, you should only ever assume a spiritual appearance when I myself, love, wanted to express myself to you humans, and thus I chose a spiritual cover for myself in order to manifest myself to people. Whereas an embodiment of Jesus' soul in the flesh before my human manifestation did not take place, although I was also able to express myself in the word through a human being if he thus had descended to earth from the kingdom of light. Jesus' soul was chosen to enable my human manifestation on earth, and this soul was truly the most elevated spirit of light who, as firstborn son, had emerged from me, that is, from my strength and the will of the one whom my greater than great love had externalized as first created being. I myself, as the eternal Spirit God, manifested myself only in Jesus, in this highest soul of light. But it had already served me as a spirit of light previously in order to enable me to speak to people, who nevertheless had a high degree of maturity which enabled me to send them such beings of light through which I myself could address them directly. But the fact that untold beings of light had also been embodied as human beings prior to this which likewise upheld people's contact to me, which brought my word to them, which, in a manner of speaking, lived on earth as a mouthpiece for me, should be accepted as truth but should not lead to misguided notions, because Jesus' soul was chosen for my human manifestation, since it had offered itself from the start for this act of compassion in the awareness of the first human being's failure. It is wrong to say that I as God have already incarnated several times. For my human manifestation in Jesus is and remains a unique act, which humanity is unable and even the world of light is only barely able to grasp, the likes of which has never before and will never be evidenced again afterwards. For Jesus was not one of many but he was the one who was to become for you humans and for all beings in the kingdom of light the visible God, whom I have chosen for myself as cover which shall remain eternally visible. And this being had an exceptional status, for his love, as the first spirit emanated by my and Lucifer's love, was so immeasurably profound that only he could be considered for my human manifestation and thus a previous process as a human being on this earth was out of the question which, however, does not exclude that he, too, took part in creating the material world, for he knew about my plan of return and he always unreservedly accepted my will and as a being with an abundance of light and strength was also able to accomplish it. This being was so devoted to me that it enabled the complete fusion with me, that he and I had to be one, because I in him and he in me absorbed each other completely, and this therefore will unveil the secret of my human manifestation in Jesus the moment the being has attained the degree of light again that gives him brightest realization. Amen.